If you're co-parenting with a narcissist, here's what you need to know about parental alienation. When a narcissistic parent feels a loss of control, they often shift their strategies, and that shift can show up in your child's perception of you. So in this video, we're going to discuss how you can cope with a narcissist who turns your kids against you. We'll unpack how that happens, why it happens, and how to respond while staying authentic and grounded. Welcome back to Restoring Resilience. I'm Chelsey Brooke Cole, and today I want to help you navigate the very difficult and painful process of co-parenting with a narcissist. I often say I think this is one of the most challenging ways that we have to deal with a narcissist in our life. Of course, every situation is difficult and has its own challenges, but when you're co-parenting with a narcissist, that means you have an innocent child in the midst of all of this, in the midst of the narcissist's chaos. And that can bring on an extra heavy burden of guilt, self-doubt, confusion, really uncertainty about whether you're doing enough, about whether you're doing what's right for you and for your kids. So I want to help you today gain some clarity, get a game plan so you can start to feel much more equipped to deal with the chaos and the craziness that a narcissistic co-parent creates. Now, coping with a narcissist who's trying to turn your kids against you and really learning how to navigate communication with a narcissist does require just a bit of an understanding of how narcissists think and how they view communication so that you know what you're dealing with and what you're up against. Because if you don't understand how a narcissist thinks and how they view communication, at least on a basic level, you will continue to feel confused and guilty and just completely overwhelmed because you will be using communication strategies that literally don't work because typical communication advice does not work with a narcissist. So the first thing I think we have to tackle here is understanding what's happening in the mind of a narcissist during a divorce, during a separation. Because any kind of situation where you need to be able to compromise or collaborate with a narcissist is going to be incredibly difficult because that kind of situation triggers a narcissist to experience a lack of control. And when a narcissist feels like they're losing control, they often escalate their behavior. They change their tactics. I've seen them do this literally within the same conversation. They'll rage, they'll be passive aggressive, they'll give the silent treatment. So losing control is very destabilizing for a narcissist. They feed on power, control, dominance. And I'm not sure that this ever becomes more apparent than when you're going through a divorce process or just when you're trying to co-parent with them. Narcissists in general have a very one-up, one-down view of the world and of relationships. So it's to them, if you're winning, they're losing. And in this situation, they actually view you as having a close relationship with the kids as you winning and them losing. There's no scenario in their mind where both of you can have a good relationship with the kids and both of you can win, because that's just not how narcissists view the world. That's not how they view relationships. And unfortunately, this is often when the control of the children escalates because narcissists view getting children on their side as a way to win and therefore as a way to gain control and feel powerful. And when you're communicating with somebody who's really more interested in dominance and collaboration, that requires a very specific strategy and a fundamental shift in the way that you really look at co-parenting altogether. First of all, there's really no such thing as co-parenting with a narcissist. Co means with. And if you're co-parenting with a narcissist, then you know they don't really do anything with you. It's either against you or without you. So your goal can't be to collaborate, not because you're not capable of that, but because that's not going to be possible with the narcissist, because that's not what they're open to. But that doesn't mean all hope is lost and there's just nothing you can do. It just means you have to have realistic expectations going into this so that you know what strategies to use, the strategies we'll talk about today. And I'm starting here because not getting this is where I see a lot of people struggle. When you keep seeing or trying to see or wanting to see the narcissist as a decent person, because you want better for your kids. So to admit that they're not a great person, that they are a narcissist, really feels like giving up hope that your children can have a good parent. And I know that can come with a lot of shame and a lot of grief. And so there's definitely, a process of grieving that has to happen here. But honestly, not admitting that you're dealing with a narcissist is going to do more harm than good. Because if you don't admit that you're dealing with a narcissist, you'll find yourself saying things to your kids, well meaning, but still unhelpful. Things like, oh, they're really a good person. They love you in their own way. So you'll be trying to encourage the kids to see the narcissist kind of in a softened way because you're trying to soften the blow of the harm that's coming from that narcissistic parent. But if you say things like that, like they're actually a really good person, they love you in their own way, then that's what you're describing love to them as. Do you really want them to think that the way that their narcissistic parent treats them is what love looks like? So accepting that you're co-parenting with a narcissist actually gives you the space to validate your own reality and your kids' reality. But this behavior is not okay. That these are harmful behaviors. And it actually helps you prepare your kids to deal with their narcissistic parent, because the better you get at communicating with a narcissist, the more equipped you are to help your kids as well. And if you won't admit that you are dealing with a narcissist, then you can't learn these strategies, and therefore you also don't know how to help your kids either. So learning this is going to be helpful to you. It's going to be helpful to your kids, and you feeling like you actually can be more empowered in helping your kids deal with this kind of situation. So what are you supposed to do when every communication that you get from a narcissist is full of contempt, criticism, a passive aggressiveness, or some other manipulation tactic? Obviously, the typical communication advice out there, just tell them how you feel, be open, assume the best. That's not going to work here. So a fundamental communication method that I teach my clients is something that I call the R&R approach, which stands for recognize the reality and respond with restraint. So that first R, recognize the reality. You're focusing on naming what they're doing when they're communicating with you. Look at the text, look at the email, see what you can identify. What manipulation strategy do you see there? Gaslighting you? Do you see passive aggressiveness? Triangulation? Basically, what are they trying to get from sending that communication? Because remember that narcissists communicate through manipulation, which means you can't get into the weeds about what they literally said, because they're only using that statement or those words to get what they want. It's not that they actually care about whatever they're saying. They're just putting those words together and sending that to you because they think that that's going to get them what they want, whether that's a reaction from you, they want to get you in a conversation, they want to bait you. So you have to, again, recognize the reality, recognize what you're dealing with, which means you're zooming out and asking, what's this communication really about? What's really going on here? Maybe you can see that they're trying to get you to engage with them. So they say something that's a blatant lie. They text you something that's totally untrue, because really they just want to get you communicating with them. They just want to trigger you into a conversation with them. Maybe you know that they just lost their job, so they sent you a really mean text out of the blue because they just need someone to offload their stress onto. They're having a bad day, so you know what? They want you to have a bad day too. Maybe all of a sudden, they're constantly referring to the parenting plan and trying to make it sound like you're not following it. And that's because you just had to file contempt on them because they haven't been following the parenting plan. So you're taking this wide angle perspective, noticing the larger pattern at play here. Where are you at in the narcissistic cycle of abuse? What kinds of things have they been arguing about? Even knowing what's going on in their life to an extent can kind of help you piece together what the communications you're getting might be about. Not that you really want to spend a lot of time obsessing about their life and what they have going on, but just if you happen to know what's going on in their life, a lot of times you can literally trace how they're communicating to you based on what's going on in their life. And if you can't figure out the angle, or the communication that they're sending you seems unusually nice or agreeable in some way, just assume that there's an angle there. You just don't know what it is yet. And stay neutral in your communication to them. Use something like the BIF strategy, which is an acronym that stands for be brief, informative, friendly, and firm. The second R is respond with restraint. So whether you know exactly what they're trying to get at or not, whether you know what they're trying to bait you with or whether you're not sure, you want to delay responding for at least an hour or two. Now, why is that? A few really important reasons, actually, because this changes the dynamic in the relationship. Narcissists expect and feel entitled to your immediate reaction. Think of how they were in the relationship. Everything revolved around them. It was one-sided. If they want something, they want you to be on it. And that doesn't change whether you're living with them or not living with them. They still feel entitled to be the center of your world, especially if they say something triggering. It really makes them feel powerful to get a reaction back from you, to get a text back. So if you immediately get back to them, they know that they've got you on the hook, and that feeds their ego. If you respond quickly, it's really easy to get roped into having these long conversations with them because let's think about this. You've likely had this happen where you responded to them quickly, thinking, oh, this is an easy answer. I'll just get back to them quickly, send this text, and move on with my day. But what happens? You are still talking to them 2 hours later. They've derailed your whole day through their emotional manipulation. So they bait you more, they trigger you more, or now they feel in control because you responded so quickly. So then they don't respond for hours or at all to your question in response to what they said, which can feel very disempowering, especially if you need a piece of information from them. It just feels like another way you're being betrayed and taken advantage of. So you do not want to respond to them quickly. You don't want to give them that kind of power. And you're also setting a precedent. If you always or almost always respond quickly to them, you are signaling to them that they're important to you, that you prioritize their messages. And I realize a lot of times you just want to respond to get it over with. You're thinking, I'll just get this out of the way because I want to be done with this. But responding quickly to a narcissist signals, oh, I'm not that busy. I don't have anything else going on. I'm available whenever. And they're going to take advantage of that. They're going to try to anyways. So we have to set these boundaries where we can. And if you do always quickly text back to them, and then one time you don't because you actually want to think about your response before you send it, now they know what they said that time that bothers you, so they know even more how to push your buttons. So we give them unintentionally a lot to work with when we respond quickly. And I think the final and most important reason that you don't want to respond quickly is because you're taking a not now attitude. This is part of the way you take your power back in a narcissistic relationship. It's in the small, seemingly subtle, but big shifts. Not responding immediately puts you back in charge of your emotional world. Taking a not now attitude. I will get to that when I want to. I'll respond to them on my terms and in my time. So you don't feel tossed around by their manipulations or what they need from you or, oh, I've got to get back to them because they texted me. No, they're not in charge of you anymore. They're not in charge of your life anymore. They're not in charge of your emotions and your energy. You get to decide that. So you choosing to respond later instead of react now helps you feel much more empowered. Now let's talk about what you can do to help your kids when they're being told lies by that other parent and that parent is trying to get them on their side. First of all, what you don't want to do is the thing that honestly feels the most natural to do, which is to defend yourself. To say, I can't believe your mom or dad said that. They said, I'm the cheater. They're the ones who cheated on me. Your mom or dad is a liar. And you don't want to say that because what's going to happen is you're going to get into a he said, she said. And a narcissist is simply going to win that battle every time because their whole life is orchestrated around making lies sound like the truth. What you have to do is back out of that battle altogether. Focus on letting the narcissist show their true colors over time. Show how you are the safe parent by being the consistent, stable, loving one. And focus on building a relationship with your children separate and apart from the narcissist. And here are the 3 strategies specifically that I will leave you with so that you can accomplish this. 1 is don't disparage, but don't minimize. What I mean by that is you definitely don't have to make the narcissistic parent look like someone they're not. In fact, I implore you, please don't do that. Don't cover up for the narcissist or minimize their harmful behaviors just because you're trying to temporarily alleviate your child's pain because of something hurtful the narcissist said. If they said something hurtful, then don't say to your child, oh, they love you in their own way. They're just really stressed at work. I'm sure they didn't mean it. Because although you're not meaning to, that teaches your child that abuse is a form of love, that how their parent acting is acceptable, that sometimes these are just things they have to put up with. So instead of minimizing what the narcissist did, say something like, that sounds really difficult, and I'm really sorry you heard that, and that wasn't okay. And just focus more on being there for their feelings, which brings me to my second suggestion, which is validate their feelings. Don't debate the facts. If your child, which they often will, come home and starts telling you things that you know they had to hear from this other parent, you know that this is just not something that a child would be thinking of. So maybe they come home and they say, well, dad says you're the reason we had to move. Don't get into a debate about how it's actually the narcissist's fault because they refused to work or because they left the relationship for somebody else. Focus on validating your child's feelings, not on correcting the facts. So say something like, it sounds like you've been told some things that have been really upsetting. That's not true, but I can totally understand how that would have brought up some big feelings. I know this move has been hard on you. Do you want to talk about that? Or how can I help you with that? We can use phrases like, that's not true. That wasn't okay. I'm sorry you were told that. That's not the full story, because you don't want to agree to something that's not true. However, you don't want to get into the weeds about the facts. You mainly want to focus on how they feel about what they heard and then reassuring them that you are here to listen and help them as best you can. The third suggestion is what I call the older placeholder. If your children press you to know something that you feel like really would be inappropriate for their age, it would just be too heavy of a burden for them to hear at this point in their life, give them a placeholder. Say something like, that's really not true what you heard, and I can explain the details one day, but I just don't want to put that burden on you right now. You deserve to just be a kid, focus on school and friends, but we can absolutely have that conversation when you're older. And that's really important because you're actually building trust with them to let them know, hey, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to say this is okay. I'm not going to placate the situation. But I am acknowledging that this would be really heavy. The truth is really heavy, and I don't want to burden you with that. That's not fair to you. The narcissistic parent is always going to put the child in the middle. But by you saying, I see that this is really heavy, and I see that what you're being told is really heavy, and I absolutely have answers and will share them with you when you're ready. But this isn't the time to do so. But I will have that conversation with you later. So a lot of times for kids just to know, okay, I'm going to have that conversation. They didn't lie to me. They didn't dismiss it or overlook it. They didn't downplay it. We're going to have that conversation later, just not right now. That's actually a really strong way to build trust over time with your child. So here are the big takeaways from today. You can't communicate with somebody who is set on controlling you instead of collaborating with you. Instead, focus on using the R&R approach of recognizing the reality and responding with restraint. With your kids, don't disparage the narcissistic parent, but don't minimize or soften their abusive behavior either. Focus on validating your child's feelings, not correcting the facts. And for topics that are just too heavy to discuss right now, put a placeholder there. Let them know you will come back to this conversation and tell them anything they want to know at a later date. And lastly, I just want to leave you with this, because I know that this conversation, this whole topic, this experience can be really heavy. It can be really easy to feel like I'm not doing enough, I'm never doing enough, being worried about your kids. But parenting is really about planting seeds. Sometimes we don't know if those seeds are taking root. We don't know what those seeds might turn into. You can't control everything that's going on in your child's life, but you can control the amount of seeds that you're planting. So don't stop planting. You are doing something. Consistency does matter, and one healthy parent is enough to make a world of difference. If this episode resonated with you and you're ready to see through more of the narcissist facades, you can feel even more empowered in dealing with them, check out my free masterclass, The Narcissist Playbook, with a link in the description. And until next time, remember that no matter where you are in your healing journey, resilience can be restored, and we will keep building it together. So I'll see you in the next episode.